So I get asked all the time, what's your favorite book? Or what are your 10 favorite? Guess what? Today, if I had to choose out of 10,000 items, my 10 favorite, that is what I'm going to show you today. My 10 favorite in chronological order, going backwards, newest to oldest. The newest, 1998, the oldest, 1574. Stick around, you don't want to miss these. So in my top 10, I have to have manga, and of everything that's manga, it's got to be Berserk. And it's not just going to be one of the printed books like this, Berserk. It is going to be the original prototype, the first release. This used to be my favorite, but it's been replaced. Believe it or not, there is something better than the original one-shot. Right there. How crazy is that? 1988 Kentaro Miura when he is in college. What do I have that beats that? So the rarest item I have, and my favorite, is right here. Where does this first appear? In this book right here. It is part of the Conviction arc. Lost Children chapter, Blue Sky Elf. This is the equivalent of the storyboard. In fact, this was given away in a lottery 2 months after it came out. That's Kentaro Miura, handwriting, giving it away, and it is 22 pages of the storyboards, of him sketching it out, laying it out with the original text. That is one of the rarest items you could ever acquire in the manga world. That is just crazy and absolutely deserves a spot on my top 10. Pop culture, Star Wars, came out 50 years ago. But before that came out, there is Adventures of the Starkiller, George Lucas, 1975, January. This is insane. In here, unfortunately, none of this made it to the movie. But this is where he gives all of the background on what the Force is. In fact, if I just kind of flip through here, stop right here, I'm going to read you from this script. This is Luke, where he gives the background, and this is what he says. In another time, long before the Empire and before the Republic had been formed, a holy man called the Skywalker became aware of a powerful energy field which he believed influenced the destiny of all living creatures, and it was called the Force of Others. Not just the Force, but the Force of Others.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things.
And after much study, he was able to know the Force, and it communicated with him. And he came to see things in a new way. His aura and power grew very strong. The Skywalker brought a new life to the people of his system, and he became one of the founders of the Republic Galactica. The Force of Others talked to him in a manner different from the way we talk. As you know, the Force of Others has two halves. Ashla the good and Bogan the Paraforce, or evil part. Fortunately, Skywalker came to know the good half and was able to resist the Paraforce, but he realized that if he taught others the way of Ashla, some with less strength might come to know Bogan, the dark side, and bring unthinkable suffering to the universe. For this reason, the Skywalker entrusted the secret of the Force only to his 12 children. You don't see that anywhere. And they in turn passed the knowledge on to their children, who became known as not just the Jedi, they became known as the Jedi Bindu of the Ashla, or Servants of the Force. How crazy is that? That is one page out of 200-something pages. That is an absolute top 10 in my collection. If you've followed me, you know I'm a massive fan of Lord of the Rings. So this is a first edition set of Lord of the Rings, not just any set. You know, I'm definitely going to have a set that is signed. All of these are signed. Not only that, this one has a letter by Tolkien. Did you know that after Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, he felt he had wasted 17 years writing it? Are you kidding me? And you say, well, show me in the letter. Now, this is a letter written to a person at Oxford who's inviting him to speak. And he goes on to say, I am absolutely loaded up on work, not only with Lord of the Rings and all of that, as if that's not heavy enough, but long, long overdue philological stuff. Having now let the cat out of the bag and revealed how I have wasted my time for years, I am pretty well in a debtor's prison under philological guard. Not that I have anything to say at the best of times that's suitable, having only been able to express myself in a type of phonological algebra. That is crazy. And did you know that Tolkien said he was only afraid of one thing? Getting a letter from Gollum.
I hate you.
Guess who I met? Andy Serkis, Gollum. And I had, in this very book, had Gollum write a letter to Tolkien. And you are now going to hear this in Gollum's voice.
My precious Professor T. The thing is, my love, is the truth is yet to be told. We want it. We need it. We are the ring bearers, and we want to be remembered as Lord Gollum, Master of the Precious.
So, a signed set, first edition Lord of the Rings with a letter by Tolkien, a letter written by Gollum to Tolkien. How is that not going to be in my top 10? Absolutely in my top 10. Now leaving the 20th century, going back to the 19th century, and one book that is a treasure in this collection is a first edition copy of the Book of Mormon. Now, did you know that if you go to the Library of Congress, they have 52 million books? What is the most requested book at the Library of Congress? A first edition copy of the Book of Mormon. And this is a first edition copy of the Book of Mormon, printed in 1830, but this just isn't any copy. This is a copy that belonged to Hyrum Smith, the brother of the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons. Historically speaking, it is a very important book and one of the top 10 items in my collection. Jane Austen is one of the great novelists of all time. Her books were printed in the early 1800s, between 1811 and 1818 is when they came out. And here I have her most famous work. This is a first edition of Pride and Prejudice. Now, Pride and Prejudice, none of the books had Jane Austen listed as the author. If you go back to 1811, it shows the author as a lady. So who is the author of Pride and Prejudice? It is by the author of Sense and Sensibility. And then in 1814, Mansfield Park comes out, and it's by the author of Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. And then Emma comes out in 1816, and it's, by now, Pride and Prejudice is blown up, and it's by the author of Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice is an absolute top 10 in my collection. Okay, this next item in my top 10, this is another treasure that is just one of the favorites that I've ever acquired, and this happens to be a one of a kind. It has to do with early American history. Now, this should be of interest to people all over the world because, in my humble opinion, there were three people who made the American Revolution happen. One, obviously, George Washington, but then you needed a fatherly figure, and that would be Benjamin Franklin. But this is the third guy. Who is it? Well, this is a law register that covers 9 years, 1795 till 1804. Why does it end in 1804? Because that's when this guy is killed in a duel with Aaron Burr. This is Alexander Hamilton's law register. Hamilton came out 10 years ago, and the whole world now knows this famous character in early American history, Alexander Hamilton. How can that not be in the top 10? This is a one of a kind. It's been digitized and it's available, but the hard copy is in my little bookstore in Provo, Utah. Can't have a top 10 without some music involved. That's what this is. This is a handwritten copy over 2 centuries ago of one of the most iconic pieces of music ever written, Mozart's Requiem in D minor. Now, it's known that he died before he finished it, and it was finished by a couple of students or assistants, a man named Zusmeyer, also handwritten out by Otto Hartwig. But this, to find a copy handwritten of the Requiem in D minor, is crazy. Now, there's been controversy over the years who did which parts, but the person who wrote it out wrote right here, like, this is Mozart right here. And then if we go back to the back, we see this part, Zusmeyer right here. So to have a handwritten copy of somebody who was a student or a close acquaintance, actually a pallbearer for Mozart, to have a handwritten copy in his hand is an absolute top 10 in my collection any day of the week. This top 10 collection wouldn't be complete without my coolest copy of Shakespeare. And Shakespeare died in 1616. The first time Shakespeare, the complete works are printed, known as the first folio, 1623. And then there's a second impression in 1632, the third is 1663, the fourth is 1685. I have one of the finest surviving copies of the second folio of Shakespeare. It's like whoever owned this lived at a place like Downton Abbey, put it on the top shelf, and nobody ever touched it. Are you kidding me? Look how beautiful that is. This book I'm holding in my hand is worth $1 million. I know some of you are concerned that I'm not using white gloves, but white gloves are not the proper method to handle these books anymore. Studies have shown more damage is caused by using white gloves than it's ever prevented. In fact, books get dropped, pages get torn. There's no debate in the rare book world about using gloves. So I am going to handle this book without gloves and show you the title page. Like, there is no way I could turn a single page like this and with confidence. And look at that. That is absolutely stunning. All original. That is the famous title page of Shakespeare, second folio. Let's take a look on the inside. And I'll show you one of the books just to show you just the beautiful typography. Look at that. There it is. Romeo and Juliet, the 1632 second folio of Shakespeare, really the most famous author, widely attributed, and highest selling author. It's estimated that over 2 billion copies of Shakespeare have been sold. I get asked all the time, what's my favorite Bible? And I have over 400 Bibles covering 6 centuries. This really is at the top of the list just because of the crazy story that goes with this. The most printed book in the history of the world is the Bible. The most printed version of the Bible is the King James Bible, and a first edition of the King James Bible is 1611. This Bible was printed a year later, but this is actually a King James Bible that was bound for King James. This is KJ, King James, bound by John Bateman, the royal bookbinder. Look at that. That is absolutely one of my favorite books. Just a beautiful personal copy of the King James Bible, printed for the king, who was really the guy who commissioned it and authorized the printing of a new edition of the Bible in the early 1600s. First edition was 1611. This came out the very next year. Personal copy of King James. Wrapping up my top 10 is a book printed in 1574. What's going on in 1574? There's a witch hunting craze going on throughout Europe. There was what was called Malleus Maleficarum, or a witch hunting guide. That is hundreds of pages on how to identify a witch, how to break spells, how to torture and get confessions. This is the most sinister book ever written on witchcraft or demonology. And this book has a very impressive backstory as far as the owner. The owner of this book was Casanova. Now, tens of thousands of people were put to death because of the printing of this book. And you'll notice this limp vellum binding. This is how books were bound back then. The backstory of this is just crazy. As of today, that's my top 10. I may find another book that replaces one of these, or I may find 2 that replace these. But now's the time, if you like what I'm doing, to like, comment, and subscribe. In fact, in the comments, tell me if you would like me to do a deeper dive into any of the books that I have just talked about, because these really have a cool background story that deserves a much deeper dive. Or if I didn't name a book that is in your top 10, I want you to tell me in the comments. But today, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of out of 10,000 books, these are my 10 favorite.